First News with Keeler in the morning on WIBX and WIBX950.com.
Ryan, we've got a message here via the WIBX 950 app. It comes from Jeff in New York Mills. It says, Ryan and CNN have done a number of hit pieces on Republicans. I'm sure. Come on, I get no laughter on that, Ryan?
What do you say to that, Ryan, when people say hit jobs on Republicans? How do you respond to that?
I mean, I just think you have to look at the body of my work and the work of CNN in totality, and I'm very confident that I'm a fair arbiter of the news, and I have been my entire career. So.
I completely agree, and I'm just having fun at Ryan's expense. I completely don't mean it. But,
all right. Well,
I'm serious.
A nice awkward moment to start things off.
Well, my joke fell flat like I was doing a roast again. I don't know.
I got it.
Yeah.
I knew this Jeff from New York Mills. I knew who that caller was. Don't worry,
right.
I got it.
That's right. Okay, Ryan. Good morning. Good morning. What about the speech yesterday that the president gave? Here's the thing. It was almost being touted yesterday as like one of the great speeches in presidential history. I don't see that, and it may have been very passionate, but are we really at a point where this is the worst thing when it comes to elections since the Civil War? Is that a bit exaggerated?
I do think the president and Democrats in general run the risk of taking this too far and overstepping their bounds. I do think the fact that he for the first time, was so forceful in his denouncements of the former president's conduct in the wake of the election, which I don't think we can understate that. You know, the danger that that Trump has provided to democracy by his continuing to suggest election fraud where none exists. I do think it's a massive problem. I do think that Biden, his forceful pushback on that was important. But, here's the thing, and I think this is where Biden finds himself in kind of a precarious position here. These big speeches are only going to take him so far. And you're right, it's going to raise the eyebrows and roll the eyes of Republicans who think that there actually needs to be some sort of safeguards put in place for elections. And it's going to frustrate progressive and liberal Democrats who feel that he's actually not doing a single thing to actually prevent some of these wide-ranging voter integrity, as they're called in Republican states, these voter access laws from being implemented. There's a simple thing that Joe Biden can do to try and, if he's actually serious about, installing a nationwide voting rights protection bill, he's got to go into Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, this collection of moderate Democrats, get them in a room and say, you got to carve out a niche for the filibuster and allow this to go through, because the only way it's going to get passed is with 50 votes. And I think Biden can give all the speeches he wants. He can go all across the country and decry the fact that he's upset that Republicans in these red states are passing these laws. But until he and his fellow moderate Democrats are willing to actually, get some, spill some blood in this game and take the risk of carving out the filibuster, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I think he's kind of in a lose-lose situation.
Now it's funny because some of the commentary I was listening to yesterday, and it might have been I might have been on CNN at one point, and Biden is getting attacked from the left now, and it's like, what, enough talk, enough speeches, you're not getting anything done. The problem is you're going to have to face the music. You're right. There's only one way to get anything done, and that is not a battle he's probably going to win with Joe Manchin in particular.
Well, and frankly, everything that we've seen from Joe Biden is that he personally is not in favor of breaking up the filibuster. He's a Senate institutionalist. He spent more time in the United States Senate than he has in any other part of his professional life. So, I think Biden and Manchin and Sinema and some of these moderate Democrats are very nervous that if they cross the bridge of breaking up the filibuster, that if they lose the Senate majority in 2022, which is a real possibility, that Mitch McConnell will come down with a heavy force and make them pay the price for blowing up the filibuster. Yep. And I think that's something that Biden definitely is concerned about. So, yeah, I had a very good friend who just left the Senate, who's one of the smartest kind of Senate tacticians, and he's a progressive former aide, and he would tell me over and over again, the Senate is all about counting. And you're only ever going to get anything passed if you've got 51 votes to get something passed. Yep. And the simple fact of the matter is, as much as Democrats, cry and complain and sound the alarm bells about voting rights, if they really cared enough about it, they'd find the 51 votes to break up the filibuster, and that would include Kamala Harris breaking a tie. And at this point, they just do not seem to be that concerned about it because they're not willing to take that step.
Yeah. It's very interesting that everybody's going up in arms over Republicans on these voting rights. And we talked about this a little bit earlier this morning. Depending on where you are in the country, it is believed that that some of these laws restricting voting do restrict and do make it more difficult for certain demographics to vote. And what it oftentimes does is it places the party in control in a position where they're they have a better chance of their incumbents winning. But you know what? I mean, if we're so upset about that, why aren't we attacking gerrymandering? Because this redistricting is just the craziest thing. I mean, the Brian Miller's district, formerly Claudia Tenney's district, and many say she was given that district because the Republicans and Democrats didn't like her in Albany. Mm-hmm. That is just the craziest district, and we have done so much redistricting that incumbents are almost guaranteed to win in this country right now.
Well, Bill, you and I have talked about gerrymandering a lot. I fundamentally believe that gerrymandering is the biggest problem in American politics. I think it is the reason that we have created such bitter partisanship. I think it's the reason that members of Congress, elected leaders on all levels, are not rewarded for finding compromise, because we've carved up these districts where it's only Republicans in some districts and only Republicans in other, or only Democrats in other districts. So there's no incentive to reach across the aisle to win elections, because you have to win primaries now. And the way I would push back on that is, and it's actually to the Democrats' detriment, is that in many states across the country, in a lot of Democratic-run states, they have actually handed the redistricting process over to independent, bipartisan redistricting commissions. For instance, in my state of Virginia, where I live now, which is now controlled by Democrats, for the first time, their redistricting process this year will be completely decided by leaders who have no elected responsibility. These are independent commissioners that are appointed to this position and whose only job is to carve districts that are geographically make sense and that are equitably disperse Republicans and Democrats in their districts. And so the problem, though, is that's not happening in Republican states. Many Republican states have hung on to their partisan form of gerrymandering and redistricting, and that could be to Democrats' disadvantage, because in some of these states these independent commissions may end up carving congressional districts that are more advantageous to Republicans. It's not happening everywhere, but you are starting to see this slow push across the country to try and change the gerrymandering rules. And I do think I said it a million times. I think that is the biggest problem in politics. And
I agree.
Everything spouts from that. I think money in politics, all that stuff. The biggest problem starts with the gerrymandering problem.
And I think in New York we have an independent commission that's going to be handling it as well. However, I do think it is the final approval comes from the legislature.
Right. Yeah, and the commission will provide a recommendation. The actual lawmakers have a chance to tinker with it.
And believe me, with the supermajority that Democrats have in New York, you almost can expect to see that what it's going to look like here. It's going to be Democrat favorite.
I was kind of giving Democrats credit for their redistricting efforts in other states, but New York's a perfect example. I mean, the New York Republican congressional delegation has shrunk, from when I was in New York. Compared to where it is now, has shrunk inexorably, and that is because every time they lose a congressional seat, the Democrats that control the legislature carve up a seat that basically eliminates a Republican, and extends the power base more downstate. I mean, if you look at Elise Stefanik's district now, when I lived in upstate New York, that district was a quarter of the size of what it is now, and now she basically represents the entire northern swath of New York State. A lot of that is Adirondack Parkland, but still, the idea that you could be represented by her in Watertown and also be represented by her in Plattsburgh,
Right.
That
Crazy.
is just unbelievable. But that's a byproduct of partisan redistricting.
Yeah. All right, interesting stuff, and ultimately, next week we can talk about this. The week after, and the week after that, I don't think anything's going to change.
I think it's a very long process. So this. I got a question for you before I go, though, Bill.
Okay.
Are you pro home run derby or are you anti home derby?
This year I'm very pro.
Well, yeah, for Met fans, it's fun. Well, because one of my good friends is a Met fan. I was him because I was excited about how well Pete Alonso performed, and he's like, "I don't watch that trash. Home run derby doesn't mean anything." But I think it's fun. My kids love it.
I went through that very same thing with Monaski. You said you don't like it, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good time. And
it's just too many.
I like the brackets. I think that's really cool the way they do the brackets. I like
it. Yeah, and there's only rounds, so it's really easily digestible.
Yeah,
and I think having it in Colorado probably made it even more exciting.
It did.
Flies off the bat there. And Alonso was the perfect character, I thought, for it. He just made it fun.
He made it fun, dancing around to whatever that the music he was playing there, and and what's interesting is Alonso was playing a character, playing a role during that whole thing. He's not this cocky guy that's banging his chest and somebody's
he's very humble. Yeah.
He's very humble, but he played that role during it, and I thought it was. And man, he's got a swing. But the problem with the home run derby, Ryan, for me, is I am very impressed with Pete Alonso, the home run derbyist. I am not so impressed with Pete Alonso this season as cleanup. It'd be nice for him to hit some of those in actual games. That's exactly my point.
He had 35 in the first round. Can he finish the season with 35?
That'd be nice.
Please?
That would make a big change.
17 right now. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought he was at 14.
He's starting to hit better at home. He was not. I think up until the last series of the season, he'd only hit one home run at Citi Field.
That's true.
And everything else had been on the road. And he hit a bunch in Citi Field. So I think once he starts feeling his swing at home, that'll be the difference. And the other problem for Alonso is, he had no protection because Conforto is where to be found for the good after the season. Lindor's starting to hit. Conforto maybe comes around. Maybe that allows him to see some better pitches and hit some more out of the ballpark.
This second half of the season for Mets fans could be unbelievably fun. It could also be a God-blessed disaster. Mm-hmm. So be prepared.
I think, my father-in-law is the eternal pessimist. I said, if you'd have taken 3.5 games up in first place at the All-Star break, I think we all would have taken that deal at the beginning of the season.
No doubt
we'll
about
see where
that.
we end up.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Ryan, thanks.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
As they say in Buffalo, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills. Yeah.
All right.
All right, thanks.
All right, bye.